The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office. "Amanda, we need to talk about the engagement party," my sister Kristen said without preamble. "No hello, no how are you, just straight to business." "Okay," I said, setting down my pen. "What about it?" "You can't come." I blinked at my computer screen, processing the words. "I'm sorry, what?" "The engagement party this Saturday. You can't attend. Brandon and I discussed it and we think it's better if you sit this one out." "Why?" I kept my voice neutral, though my stomach had started to knot. Kristen sighed, that particular sigh she used when she thought she was being patient with me. "You're too embarrassing to attend. Brandon's parents are very successful people. His father is a senior VP at a tech company, his mother runs corporate operations. They have standards. And well, you're not exactly polished." I looked down at my jeans and Georgetown hoodie, my standard work-from-home outfit when I didn't have meetings. "Kristen, It's not just the clothes, Amanda. It's everything. You work from home doing freelance tech stuff. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. You live in that tiny apartment. Brandon's family is going to wonder why my sister is so unsuccessful." "I see. I knew you'd understand," she said, relief evident in her voice. "The whole family backed her up anyway. Mom and Dad agree it's better if you don't come. They don't want you to feel uncomfortable around Brandon's family." "How considerate." "Exactly. I'm glad you're being mature about this. We'll do a separate dinner, just us, after the wedding. Something casual where you'll fit in better." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my home office, the converted second bedroom of my tiny apartment, which was actually a 1,800 square foot penthouse I owned in a building I'd purchased 3 years ago, and considered my options. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Kristen told us. We think it's for the best. You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" Then my father. "Sorry, kiddo. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Kristen's happiness is important." I turned back to my computer and opened my company directory. Foster Technology Solutions. 2,400 employees across 8 offices. Annual revenue, $340 million. And there, in the executive listings, Robert Chin, Senior VP of Product Development. Linda Chin, VP of Operations. Brandon Chen's parents, who worked for my company. I pulled up their personnel files. Both excellent employees, both up for significant promotions in the next review cycle. Robert was being considered for Executive VP. Linda was in line for Senior VP. I opened my email and sent a message to my Chief Operating Officer. "Please schedule a meeting with me and the Chens for Friday at 2 p.m. Topic: their quarterly presentation to me regarding the new product pipeline. I want to review it personally before the weekend." She responded immediately. "Scheduled. They'll be thrilled. They've been hoping to present directly to you." I smiled. They had no idea who I was. Saturday evening, I parked my old Honda across the street from the country club where Kristen's engagement party was being held. I wasn't going inside, I'd been uninvited after all. But I was curious to see the event my sister thought I'd ruin. At her engagement party, I watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my family mingled with Brandon's relatives. The ballroom was decorated beautifully, white and gold, very elegant. Kristen looked beautiful in her emerald cocktail dress, hanging on Brandon's arm, introducing him to relatives and family friends. My parents were working the room, clearly trying to impress Brandon's family with stories of their successful daughters. Well, daughter singular, I supposed. I watched my mother laugh at something Brandon's aunt said, her hand touching the woman's arm in that way she had of making people feel special. My father was deep in conversation with what looked like Brandon's father. Tall, distinguished, clearly comfortable in his expensive suit. They were probably bonding over business and success. Her fiancé's parents arrived late, rushing in at 7:30 looking slightly harried but professional. Robert Chin in his suit, tie loosened just slightly. Linda Chin in a beautiful navy dress, carrying her laptop bag, the one I'd seen her carry into countless meetings at headquarters. I was too far away to hear through the glass, but I could read lips well enough and I knew what they'd say. I'd read their emails about how excited they were to finally present to me personally. "So sorry we're late," Linda Chin was saying to Kristen and Brandon, her hands gesturing apologetically. "We had to finish the quarterly presentation for our CEO Amanda Foster. She wanted to review our product pipeline personally before her Monday meeting. It's a huge opportunity for us. We've been trying to get FaceTime with her for years. Robert added something and I could make out biggest career opportunity, and so excited. I watched from my series. My sister's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion first. Who was Amanda Foster? Then recognition as she processed the name. Then dawning realization, her eyes widening. Then pure horror as she understood exactly what it meant. She grabbed Brandon's arm, pulling him aside. Even from here I could see her talking frantically, gesturing. Brandon looked confused then shocked. He pulled out his phone. My phone rang. Brandonchan. I answered. Hello. Is this Amanda Foster? His voice was tight. It is. The Amanda Foster who owns Foster Technology Solutions? Yes. My sister's. You're Kristen's sister Amanda? That's correct. A long silence. She uninvited you from our engagement party because she was embarrassed by you. She did. Because you work from home doing freelance tech stuff. That's what she said. Another silence. You're the CEO of a $340 million company. You founded it when you were 23. You've been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and TechCrunch. My parents work for you. All accurate. And you were going to let her believe you were some unsuccessful freelancer? I tried to tell her about my company many times, I said calmly. Every Sunday dinner for 8 years. He never listened. She was too busy talking about her marketing manager job and how successful she was at her firm. Oh my God, he breathed. She has no idea, does she? Your parents don't know either. No one in my family knows. They decided I was a failure and stopped asking questions. Eventually, I stopped trying to correct them. My parents are about to tell everyone they work for you. They're excited about Monday's meeting. They've been talking about finally meeting the CEO all week. I know. I read their emails. Should I warn Kristen? That's up to you, Brandon. But they're about to mention it anyway. Your mother is talking to my mother right now. Through the window I watched Linda Chen chatting with my mother. I saw her mention Amanda Foster and gesture enthusiastically. My mother's smile froze. She looked confused. My phone buzzed with a call. My mother. I declined it. Another call. My father. Declined. A text from Kristen, call me right now. I texted back, I was uninvited to your party. I'm respecting your wishes by not attending. Enjoy your evening. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Amanda, what the hell? Kristen's voice was shrill. Brandon's mother just said she works for Amanda Foster at Foster Technology Solutions. She said you're her CEO. She's lying, right? Playing some weird joke. She's not lying. That's impossible. You work from home doing freelance web design or coding or whatever. I work from home because I own the company and I can work wherever I want, I interrupted. I do freelance tech consulting for Fortune 500 companies because I'm good at it and it's how I built my initial client base before founding Foster Technology Solutions. You can't. How would you even start a company? With $200,000 I'd saved from my freelance work and a business loan for another $300,000. I was 23. You were busy planning your wedding to your first husband at the time. You didn't notice. Your first husband hit like a slap. Kristen's first marriage had lasted 14 months. That company is worth hundreds of millions, Kristen said weakly. $340 million in annual revenue, I confirmed. The company itself is valued at around $2.1 billion. I own 73% of it. Do the math. Silence. Your apartment is a penthouse I own in a building I bought. The tiny apartment is 1,800 square feet with a view of the harbor. Your car is paid off and reliable. I don't need a luxury vehicle to prove anything. I'd rather invest in my business and my employees. Employees, she repeated numbly. Brandon's parents are your employees. Robert and Linda Chen. Both excellent workers. Both up for major promotions actually. Robert's being considered for executive VP, Linda for senior VP. Considered, Kristen latched onto the word. You're considering them? I said carefully. Before this evening. What does that mean? It means I'm reconsidering whether people who raised a son with such poor judgment should be in senior leadership positions. That's not fair. Brandon didn't do anything. Brandon agreed with you that I was too embarrassing to attend your engagement party, I said. He backed up your decision to exclude me because of my perceived lack of success. That shows poor character judgment. I don't want senior leaders who make decisions based on superficial appearances. You can't punish them because of me. I can do whatever I want, Kristen. I own the company. Brandon's voice came through the phone. She must have put me on speaker. Miss Foster, please. My parents have worked at your company for 6 years. They've done nothing wrong. This is my fault, not theirs. It's both your faults, I corrected. But I appreciate you trying to take responsibility. That's more than your fiancé is doing. What do you want? Kristen asked desperately. An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't know you were rich and successful. I'm sorry I didn't take your work seriously. You're sorry you got caught, I said. That's different from being actually sorry. My mother's voice came through. Amanda, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding, Mom. Kristen told me I was too embarrassing to attend her engagement party. You and Dad agreed. Those were conscious choices based on your perception of my life. The misunderstanding is that you thought you were right about your perception. We didn't know, my mother protested. Because you never asked. 8 years, Mom. 8 years of Sunday dinners where I tried to tell you about my company, my success, my life. You talked over me every single time. You were too busy being impressed with Kristen's entry-level marketing job to notice I'd built a tech empire. Their job offers were revoked by Monday. My text to my COO read as I sat in my car. Please prepare revised promotion recommendations excluding the Chens. Move Sarah Martinez and Tom Williams into those roles instead. They've earned it. Understood, she replied. Any explanation for the change? Personal conflict of interest. I'll explain Monday. I could see the chaos inside the country club. Kristen was crying. My mother looked devastated. My father was trying to talk to Robert Chin, who looked confused and worried. Brandon stood apart from everyone on his phone, probably trying to find out everything he could about me. My phone rang again. Kristen still on speaker. Please, Brandon said. I know we made a terrible mistake, but my parents don't deserve to lose their promotions. They've worked so hard. They have worked hard, I agreed. Which is why they're keeping their current positions. They're just not getting promoted. Sarah Martinez and Tom Williams have also worked hard, and they didn't raise children who judge people by their cars and apartments. That's not fair, Kristen sobbed. Fair. I laughed, a sharp sound. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to exclude me from your engagement party? Was it fair to tell the whole family I was an embarrassment? Was it fair to decide my life was unsuccessful without ever asking me about it? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going home. You're going to finish your engagement party and think very carefully about how you treat people based on appearances. Monday morning, I'm meeting with the Chens about their quarterly presentation. They'll still have their jobs, but the promotions are off the table. For how long? Robert Chen's voice, quiet and strained. Until I'm convinced they've raised a son who values character over appearances. Could be 6 months, could be 6 years. Could be never. That's up to Brandon. How is he supposed to prove that? Linda Chen asked. That's his problem to solve, I said. Not mine. I hung up and drove home to my penthouse apartment. Monday morning, the Chens gave an excellent presentation. Their product pipeline recommendations were solid, their data impeccable. I approved their plans and thanked them for their work. Miss Foster, Robert Chin said as they were leaving. About the promotions. Off the table for now, I confirmed. Your work performance is excellent. Your judgment in your personal life needs work. When your son demonstrates that he's learned to value people for who they are rather than what they appear to be, we'll revisit the promotion discussion. How long will that take? Linda asked. As long as it takes, I said. In the meantime, I'm giving you both 5% raises to reflect your excellent work performance. The promotion isn't about your work. It's about leadership character. I need senior leaders who raise children with integrity. They nodded, understanding. After they left, my CO came in. That was generous. The raises. They're good employees, I said. They just raised a son who needs to learn some things. That's not entirely their fault, but it does reflect on their judgment. Fair enough. Also, your sister has called 6 times this morning. I'm not available. What should I tell her? Nothing. She's not a client. That evening, Brandon showed up at my building. The doorman called up. Mr. Chin is here to see you, Miss Foster. Send him away. He says it's important. About his engagement. I sighed. Fine. Send him up. Brandon looked tired when I opened the door. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. I broke up with Kristen, he said. I blinked. Why? Because you were right. She judged you based on appearances. She was embarrassed by you without knowing anything about your actual life. And I went along with it because... He paused. Because I was too focused on what my parents would think. I valued their opinion over doing the right thing. That's unusually self-aware. I've spent the last 2 days thinking about it, he said. My parents raised me to value hard work and integrity. Then I met a woman working from home in jeans and an old car, and I judged her as unsuccessful. That's the opposite of what they taught me. So you're here to apologize and ask if there's any way my parents can earn back their promotions. Not for me, I know I screwed up, but they really do deserve them. I considered him. 6 months. Your parents stay in their current roles with their raises. In 6 months, if their performance continues to be excellent, we'll discuss promotions again. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your parents for being good employees despite raising a son who needs to work on his judgment. He winced but nodded. Fair. And Amanda? I'm sorry. For what it's worth. Apology noted. After he left, I called my parents. Hello. My mother sounded cautious. I'm having dinner at my place this Sunday, I said. You're invited. So is Kristen if she wants to come. I'll order from the Italian place you like. Amanda, we're so sorry. Sunday at 6, I interrupted. Come or don't. Your choice. They came. All 3 of them. Kristen cried and apologized. My parents asked questions. Real questions. About my company, my life, my success. I answered honestly. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked. I tried. You didn't listen. We're listening now, my mother said. Good, I said. Better late than never. It wasn't perfect. Relationships damaged by 8 years of dismissal don't heal in one dinner. But it was a start. And the next Sunday when I talked about my company's expansion plans, they actually listened. That was worth more than any promotion I could give.
The sun was warm over Charlotte as I pulled into the parking lot of the country club, the familiar hum of Sunday brunch traffic mingling with distant laughter from the patio. I'd come expecting polite smiles, awkward conversations, and the usual undercurrent of competitiveness that always followed Meredith. She had invited me ostensibly to meet her newborn niece, but I already sensed the tension the moment I stepped into the dining room. Meredith was hovering near the high chair, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room like a general inspecting her troops. When she saw me approach, her face tightened. She held her baby protectively, and the warmth I'd hoped to offer dissolved instantly under her glare. "Don't touch my baby, you are disgusting," she snapped, voice sharp enough to turn a few heads. The words struck me like a cold gust, and I stopped short, stunned into silence. My own heartbeat seemed too loud in my ears as I realized that any attempt to explain myself would only escalate the situation. I retreated slightly, forcing a polite smile while keeping my hands firmly at my sides. The baby, oblivious to the tension, cooed softly, reaching toward me with tiny fingers. I froze, a twinge of sadness cutting through my shock. Meredith's glare hardened, and the motherly shield she held around her child made it clear that my presence was not only unwelcome but offensive in her eyes. For the rest of the brunch, I sat quietly at the edge of the table, observing the conversation flow around me. Meredith dominated every topic, her voice confident, her laughter light but edged with control. I felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, dismissed not just by her, but by the family who allowed it. By the time the brunch ended, I knew one thing: I couldn't let this moment pass without reflection, and the events of the day would stay with me long after the sun set. The drive back to Asheville gave me space to think, to remember past slights, and to consider what I could do differently next. The drive back to Asheville was quiet, the hum of the tires on the highway a steady backdrop to the storm in my mind. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, replaying Meredith's words over and over. "You are disgusting." Those 6 syllables felt heavier than any insult I could remember, not because of their cruelty, but because they came from someone who was supposed to know me. I thought back to every time I had supported her, helped with investments, covered gaps in her decisions, kept quiet when her mistakes could have cost the firm clients. None of it mattered in her eyes. The frustration twisted inside me, a mix of anger and guilt. Why did I let it hurt me so deeply? Why did I care about her opinion after years of being dismissed? Questions churned in my head as the miles passed. Could I let this slide, keep the peace, and maintain the facade of civility? Or was it finally time to acknowledge the imbalance, to assert myself in a way she wouldn't anticipate? I felt the tension between patience and action, the tug-of-war of wanting justice without causing irreparable harm. By the time I crossed into the familiar streets of Asheville, my mind had settled into a tentative resolve. Silence no longer seemed entirely safe, but neither did impulsive retaliation. I needed a plan, one that would give me leverage while keeping my conscience intact. I parked in front of my apartment, the evening light casting long shadows, and sat for a moment before opening my laptop, ready to review the numbers that might give me the upper hand. Chapter 3. Hidden Leverage. Back in my apartment, I pulled up the spreadsheets I had quietly maintained over the past few years. I wasn't a passive investor in Meredith's boutique investment firm. I had always monitored the numbers, tracked the cash flow, and noted how dependent the company had become on my capital. Tonight, in the dim light of my desk lamp, I could finally see the full picture. The firm was over-leveraged. Several pending deals hinged on lines of credit I controlled. A single withdrawal on my part could trigger delays, missed payments, and a scramble to cover obligations. The realization sent a shiver through me, not from malice, but from the raw weight of responsibility. I held more influence than I had ever admitted to myself, and the temptation to wield it was almost intoxicating. As I analyzed the accounts, I reminded myself of Meredith's arrogance. She assumed her control was absolute, her confidence unshakable. She had never anticipated that I was quietly steering critical parts of her business. Every projection I ran confirmed the same conclusion: my investment wasn't just a contribution, it was a lever that could shift the entire firm. I leaned back in my chair, conflicted. The excitement of having power clashed with my ethical hesitation. Could I justify using this leverage as a response to her cruelty, or would I cross a line I couldn't come back from? Each scenario played out in my head like a chess game, Meredith's moves predictable, my responses measured. I realized that this wasn't just about anger, it was about balance, about finally asserting my presence without descending into revenge. Hours passed as I reviewed every pending deal, every line item that depended on me. My decision was forming, slow and deliberate. I wasn't rushing, I needed clarity, certainty, and a plan that left no room for error. By the time the city lights of Asheville blurred past my window, I had mapped out the contours of influence I held. The path forward was narrow but clear, and for the first time in years, I felt a cautious surge of control over my own life and over a situation that had long seemed impossible to navigate. Tomorrow, I would begin putting the plan into motion. The next morning, I began reaching out to my trusted financial advisors, careful to keep the calls discreet. Each conversation was precise, measured, the kind that left no room for misunderstanding. I explained my intentions without emotion, framing the withdrawal as a routine portfolio adjustment. Yet beneath the calm tone, I felt the familiar churn of anticipation and apprehension. Legal counsel followed. I needed the withdrawal executed flawlessly, with every document verified and every procedure airtight. There was no margin for error, not with Meredith's firm depending so heavily on my investment. My lawyer advised me on timelines, potential complications, and the subtle nuances of contractual obligations. I listened carefully, asking questions I already suspected the answers to, making mental notes of where I could apply pressure without drawing attention. As the day unfolded, small complications emerged. The bank requested additional verification on a few transactions, citing internal compliance protocols. A minor error in one document required resubmission. Each delay felt like a heartbeat stretched too long, a reminder that control was never absolute. I resisted the urge to rush, keeping my voice calm and my mind focused. Panic would be a mistake. Patience was a weapon as sharp as any financial lever. Between calls, I reviewed Meredith's public filings, tracking her recent deals and noting where the timing of my withdrawal would have the most impact. I imagined her confidence slowly cracking as she confronted unexpected obstacles. The thought was satisfying, though I pushed it aside, reminding myself that my goal was not humiliation but balance and assertion. By evening, everything was in motion. My advisors were aligned, the paperwork nearly complete, and I had rehearsed the timing of each step with meticulous attention. The tension in my chest had shifted from anxiety to a steady vigilance. Every decision carried weight. Every action a ripple that could reshape the firm and my relationship with Meredith forever. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet of my apartment settle over me. The plan was ready, the moment approaching. Tomorrow, I would begin the final steps, and nothing could turn back the course I had set. I arrived at the Charlotte networking event early, taking a seat near the back and observing the room. Meredith was already there, laughing loudly, shaking hands with clients, and commanding attention as if the room belonged solely to her. She carried herself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, and I could see the way people deferred to her opinions without question. As the presentations began, Meredith dismissed any mention of potential market risks. She waved off concerns about over-leveraged accounts and upcoming deals, insisting that everything was under control. Her words were casual, her tone light, but the underlying hubris was unmistakable. She truly believed nothing could threaten her grasp on the firm. I sat quietly, taking mental notes. Every shrug, every dismissive comment reinforced what I already knew. Her overconfidence left gaps I could exploit if I acted with precision. I contrasted her impulsive behavior with my own careful, deliberate strategy. Where she saw certainty, I saw vulnerability. Where she ignored details, I cataloged every potential leverage point. The more I watched, the more the pattern became clear. Meredith's arrogance wasn't just social, it was professional. She underestimated the very person who had been quietly supporting her success, the one holding a stake she thought irrelevant. The thought gave me a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that timing would be everything. Acting too early or too late could undermine the careful equilibrium I had been constructing. By the time the networking hour ended, I had mapped the most opportune moments to proceed. I left the event unnoticed, blending into the crowd, my mind focused entirely on the next steps. Meredith remained oblivious to the quiet storm forming just beyond her awareness, her confidence intact yet dangerously misaligned with reality. Driving back to Asheville, I reviewed the sequence of actions in my head, knowing that the subtle warning signs I had observed today would guide my decisions in the critical days ahead. The morning air in Asheville felt crisp as I sat at my desk, laptop open, files organized, and phone within reach. Today was the day. After weeks of planning, checking, and double-checking every detail, I was finally going to execute the withdrawal of my investment from Meredith's firm. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a mixture of satisfaction and hesitation swirling inside me. I started with the transfer forms, carefully filling out every field, ensuring accuracy. A minor error flagged by the bank required a phone call and resubmission, but I remained composed. Each step had been anticipated, and I navigated the minor obstacles with the calm patience I had rehearsed. My advisor's voice over the line was steady, guiding me through the procedural nuances, but I could feel the weight of the decision pressing against my chest. As the funds moved out, I watched the numbers update in real time. The firm's balance reflected the shift immediately, and a quiet thrill ran through me. This was more than a financial maneuver. It was a statement, a reclaiming of authority that had been invisible for too long. Yet alongside the satisfaction came guilt, a nagging reminder that family ties were complicated and power could wound even when wielded carefully. I pictured Meredith and Charlotte, confident as ever, completely unaware of the impact that was already unfolding. Her impulsive optimism would soon collide with the reality I had engineered, and I had to resist the urge to check in, to gauge her reaction. Patience was essential. The moment of revelation would have its full effect only if I remained invisible. By late afternoon, all the paperwork had been confirmed, every document verified, and the transfer finalized. I leaned back in my chair, a deep exhale of tension escaping me. The plan was complete, flawless in execution, and now it was out of my hands. I shut my laptop and stared out the window, contemplating the days ahead. The fallout would begin soon, and I had prepared as much as I could. All that remained was to wait, to observe, and to maintain the composure that had brought me this far. Tomorrow, the consequences of my decision would start to reveal themselves, and I would see how the first ripple spread through Meredith's carefully controlled world. The next morning, I checked my phone first thing, expecting nothing more than routine updates. What arrived, however, confirmed the shift I had anticipated. Notifications from financial news outlets, murmurs in professional circles, and internal alerts from the firm all pointed to the same reality: Meredith's company was experiencing immediate liquidity strain. She had discovered the gap left by my withdrawal, and the panic was evident even from afar. The first emails leaked internally concerns about payroll, unsettled transactions, and delayed contracts. Staff members who had once looked to her with unquestioning confidence were now questioning their own security. Calls to clients went unanswered as frontline managers tried to manage the chaos. I could almost hear the frantic energy building in Charlotte through the pattern of alerts. Meredith's initial attempts to reassure investors and employees fell flat. Her usual charm and decisiveness couldn't mask the tangible disruption caused by the sudden withdrawal. Reports were late, deals paused, and the sense of control she had projected so flawlessly was fracturing under the weight of reality. For the first time, the arrogance I had witnessed at the networking event had tangible consequences. I monitored silently, resisting the urge to interfere or communicate. The distance gave me perspective. This was no longer about personal vindication. It was about observing the structural fragility I had long known existed. Every misstep, every overlooked contingency in Meredith's operations highlighted the reliance she had placed on my investment. It was a revelation for her, though she would never admit it openly. The tension in me grew as alerts continued to cascade. Emails flagged with urgent subject lines, client calls bouncing, employees whispering behind closed doors, all signs that the first ripple of my action had become a wave. Meredith's frantic attempts to stabilize the situation were visible in her hurried statements to stakeholders, each one more reactive than the last. I felt a mix of satisfaction and unease, knowing the power I held had real consequences, both professional and emotional. By the afternoon, it became unmistakable the firm's stability was under serious threat. Meredith's confident facade had cracked, her usual control slipping, and I watched as the realization settled over her, heavy and unrelenting. The moment I had been preparing for had arrived, and from my quiet vantage point, I observed the first true signs of reckoning. Tomorrow, the unfolding chaos would reach new intensity, and I would see just how deeply the firm and my sister would feel the absence of what they had once taken for granted. I arrived at the small cafe in Asheville a few minutes early, choosing a quiet corner where we could speak without interruption. Meredith walked in shortly after, her expression a mix of surprise and disbelief when she saw me waiting. She slid into the seat across from me, her usual confidence replaced by tension she couldn't quite mask. "I can't believe this," she said, voice tight. "What you did. Do you have any idea what you've caused? I kept my tone even, measured. I understand the impact. Meredith, that's why I moved carefully, ensuring every step was within my rights and fully documented. Her hands clenched around her coffee cup, knuckles white. Within your rights, you withdrew everything. You destabilized the firm. Employees are panicking. Clients are leaving. How could you be so cold? I met her gaze calmly. I didn't act out of malice. I acted because boundaries matter. I've been invisible in the decisions that depended on me, overlooked despite my contributions. You underestimated the role I played and assumed my silence meant consent. It didn't. Meredith's voice cracked slightly, frustration and recognition mingling. You think this is about proving a point about revenge? No, I said firmly. It's about accountability. It's about showing that actions have consequences, and that confidence unchecked by awareness can lead to failure. She leaned back, a sharp exhale escaping her lips. I could see the realization settling in, the weight of her oversight pressing down. For the first time, the arrogance I had witnessed for years faltered under the tangible results of her misjudgment. I felt the tension between us ease slightly, though the conversation remained charged. My point had been made not through anger, not through confrontation, but through deliberate, principled action. I had asserted both moral and strategic victory, and Meredith had no choice but to acknowledge it, internally, if not aloud. As we left the cafe, the gravity of the moment lingered between us. The lessons of the day would shape how we approached each other going forward, and I knew that reflection, not retaliation, would define the path ahead. Tomorrow, I would take time to process everything that had unfolded and consider how to move forward while maintaining the boundaries I had finally established. Back in my apartment, I sank into the worn leather chair by the window and let the quiet of Asheville envelop me. The events of the past days replayed in my mind: the brunch, the drive home, the meticulous planning, and finally, the confrontation. Each moment carried its weight, and the contrast between past conflicts with Meredith and the calm resolution now felt stark. I thought of the countless times I had been overlooked, dismissed, or minimized in family discussions and business matters. Each slight had left a mark, but none compared to the satisfaction of having acted deliberately, strategically, and with integrity. I had asserted myself without cruelty, proving my influence and capabilities without stooping to aggression. Flashes of old arguments and tense family dinners surfaced, juxtaposed with the composed way I had handled Meredith's arrogance this time. The lessons were clear patience, preparation, and principled action mattered more than loud protests or emotional outbursts. Power was not in domination, but in understanding leverage, boundaries, and the impact of one's choices. As evening settled over the city, I realized that success was no longer about making someone else fail. It was about claiming my own space, my own agency, and respecting the limits I set for myself. The quiet control I now held felt far more empowering than any victory I could have forced externally. I stood, moving to the desk where my laptop still glowed softly, and began planning the next steps: how to maintain my independence, how to protect my investments, and how to navigate the family dynamics with the clarity I had finally achieved. Tomorrow, I would continue building on these lessons, ensuring that the future reflected both the strength of my choices and the boundaries I had fought to establish. In the days that followed, I began to integrate the lessons I had learned into both my personal and professional life. I reached out to family members cautiously, restoring connections without compromising the boundaries I had finally established. Conversations were measured, sincere, and intentional, a far cry from the reactive arguments of the past. At work, I reviewed my investment strategies, identifying opportunities that aligned with my values and long-term goals. Each decision was deliberate, grounded in both financial prudence and ethical considerations. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth through confrontation. The results of my actions had spoken for themselves. I noticed a subtle shift within myself: calm strategy, patience, and principled decision-making had provided a sense of empowerment far stronger than any impulsive retaliation ever could. I felt grounded, aware of the leverage I held, and confident in my ability to navigate challenges without sacrificing integrity. As I sat by the window that evening, reviewing future plans and mapping the steps ahead, I recognized that the true measure of influence was not the downfall of others, but the strength and clarity of my own choices. The path forward was mine to define, shaped by wisdom, strategy, and a quiet understanding of the power that comes from restraint. With these lessons in mind, I closed my laptop, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life. Independent, deliberate, and unwavering. The rain hadn't let up all day, the kind that drummed steady against the sidewalks of the South End and pooled at the corners of Harrison Avenue. I hurried from the garage under an umbrella, my laptop bag heavy against my shoulder, already planning a late night of sketch revisions. By the time I reached the lobby of my building near Ink Block, my shoes were damp, but the sight of polished marble floors and the familiar nod from the concierge usually brought comfort. Not tonight. Something felt off the moment the elevator doors opened to my floor. A faint smell of cardboard and adhesive tape reached me before I even unlocked the door. When I pushed it open, the scene was unrecognizable. Towers of cartons blocked the living room windows, my scarves, folded wrong, poked out of half-sealed boxes, stacks of shoes, my sketchbooks. Even framed photographs had been stripped from the shelves and packed away. Sitting on the sectional, legs crossed and phone in hand, was my sister Lavinia Lavi to everyone else, though the nickname had long lost its warmth for me. She didn't look up right away. Instead, she tapped her screen, let out a little laugh, and then finally said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, "We need to clear space. My husband and kids are moving in next weekend." Jonah was there too, standing awkwardly by the coffee table. His face was pale, his hands tied around the back of a chair. He didn't speak. On speakerphone, our parents chimed in faintly, their voices tinny with distance. My mother's words, "It's practical, darling. Families should stay together," felt like another box being taped shut. I dropped my keys on the counter with a metallic clatter, the sound sharper than I intended. "You're moving in." My voice barely carried, but Lavi smiled as if she had already won something. While she went on about bedrooms and how children needed space, my eyes drifted to the hallway closet. Wedged between the vacuum and a stack of fabric bolts was a slim red binder. The lease. My initials on every page. My name, alone. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I stepped further inside, letting the door click shut behind me, the boxes standing like silent witnesses to what had just begun. It hadn't started with boxes. It began weeks earlier, on a gray afternoon when Lavi showed up at my door with 2 rolling suitcases and a practiced sigh. "Just a few days," she said, brushing past me before I had even set down my coffee. Jonah looked startled but gave her a weak nod. I told myself it was temporary, that she would vanish as quickly as she had appeared. By the second week, the guest room was no longer mine to offer. She had filled the dresser with discount store clothes and draped the bed in a throw that clashed with the neutral palette I had chosen. Soon, the guest bathroom was painted lavender, a color so sharp it bled into the hall whenever the door opened. When I asked about it, she tossed her hair and replied, "You're welcome." Packages began arriving almost daily. Groceries ordered through my Prime account. Rugs with bold patterns that fought against the polished wood floors. Wall art with faux inspirational quotes. The apartment I had curated carefully, every detail tied to years of work, felt hijacked by someone with no stake in paying for it. Jonah grew quieter as his health dipped. He winced at the clutter but said nothing, explaining softly at night that he didn't want to start a fight. Our parents called from Cambridge and assured me this was only what families did. "Sisters helping each other," my mother said, as if the phrase were a balm. I held my tongue. On a Sunday morning, when Lavi was still asleep and Jonah was resting, I slipped into my office and made photocopies of the lease and the building regulations. I slid the duplicates into a slim folder and tucked it into my work bag. If lines were being crossed, I wanted proof of where they had been drawn. By the time Lavi began hinting about bigger changes, I already knew what I would need to show. The morning I walked into my office and found the drafting table shoved against the wall, I knew the invasion had moved from inconvenience to theft. Lavi stood in the center of the room, waving her hands like a realtor conducting a tour. "This would make a perfect study and playroom," she announced. "The kids will need a space, and Dad's been talking about a quiet corner for his reading." My sketches, half-finished swatches pinned carefully to corkboards, had been stacked in a corner like junk mail. Jonah stepped forward, voice low but firmer than I'd heard in weeks. "Don't touch her samples. Lavi. That's her work." She turned, all saccharine smile, and placed a hand on his shoulder as if soothing a child. "Relax, little brother. She can move them somewhere else. Creativity needs change." He faltered, and whatever resistance he had managed to gather slipped away. Later that evening, our parents called. My mother's tone carried the same rehearsed patience she used when I was a teenager refusing to lend Lavi a dress. "Be generous, Tamsin. Your sister is building stability. You have so much space. Sharing is what family does." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, staring across the apartment that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. My parents' words carried weight, but not authority. Not here. After the call ended, I sat at my desk, returning each displaced sketch to its place. I opened the red binder again, tracing the clauses with my fingertip. Sole leaseholder Tamsin Hale. Tenancy at will terminable with 30 days notice by tenant. Non-transfer clause, no subletting, no assignment without landlord consent. Those weren't just lines on a page. They were boundaries no one else seemed willing to recognize. If my family refused to respect limits spoken aloud, I would have to enforce the ones written in black and white. The next morning, when Lavi casually mentioned that the master bedroom would obviously be better suited for our parents than for me, I didn't argue. I only looked at her, then at Jonah, and carried the binder into the kitchen where the morning light caught its red spine like a warning. I came home early that Thursday, rain streaking the glass panes, only to find more boxes crowding the living room. My closet was half empty, scarves folded badly, shoes paired into crates. Lavi lounged on the sectional, sipping Chardonnay with the satisfaction of someone already settled. When she finally looked at me, she tilted her head, her tone casual but sharpened at the edges. "Don't be so dramatic, Tamsin. This isn't really your home. It's a rental." Jonah shifted uneasily near the window. His hands trembled, and his gaze fell to the floor. The silence from him was almost worse than her words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I crossed to the hall closet, pulled out the slim red binder, and carried it into the room. Setting it on the coffee table, I flipped it open so the black ink of my name faced up. My initials marked every page. "If you want it," I said evenly, "take it. Just keep paying rent $5,300 every month." The color drained from Jonah's face, and for the first time, Lavi's smirk wavered. Our parents' voices, faint through the phone speaker, went quiet. I closed the binder with a soft snap, slid it back under my arm, and reached for my keys. No shouting, no fight, only the decision that mattered. I walked to the door, feeling the weight of their stunned silence behind me. By dusk, I was standing on the porch of my parents' house in Cambridge. The city lights glowed beyond the Charles, the rain easing into mist. Eleanor opened the door before I even knocked. She looked at me, saw the exhaustion in my eyes, and said nothing more than, "Your old room is ready." She placed a mug of tea in my hands, steam rising, warmth cutting through the chill. I sipped slowly, the binder resting at my side, the taste of control settling with the heat. I wasn't finished. Not yet. Tomorrow. The real plan would begin. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. the red binder still on the nightstand beside the teacup my mother had left. The storm had cleared overnight, and the pale light over the Charles felt sharper, as if the city itself had been scrubbed clean. I dressed quickly, slid the lease into my bag, and drove back across the river to the south end. Mr. Morales, the building manager, was already in his office, sorting envelopes. He looked up, surprised to see me so early. I set the binder on his desk, opened to the termination clause, and handed him a typed letter. "This is my 30-day notice." I said, "No transfer, no subletting. The unit is to be vacated completely." He adjusted his glasses and read through the pages carefully. "You're certain?" "Yes," I said, steady. "And I'd like confirmation in writing." He nodded, signed the bottom of my copy, and stamped the date. The sound of the stamp hitting paper felt like a lock turning. By midday, my phone buzzed with alerts. Lavi had posted photographs from the balcony, the skyline behind her, wine glass in hand, our parents grinning on either side. The caption read, "Our new chapter in Boston." She tagged it with a string of hearts. Within the hour, a friend who still lived in the building forwarded screenshots. "Thought you should see what's being said." The message read. Comments from neighbors followed. "So they took over already. Isn't the lease under Tamsin's name?" Gossip traveled faster than the elevator. That evening, Jonah texted, asking to meet. I agreed, but only on neutral ground. We chose a cafe near Back Bay Station, the kind of place where trains rumbled beneath the floorboards. He arrived late, thinner than before, his eyes shadowed. I froze. He admitted, his hands wrapped tight around the paper cup. "I should have stopped her, but she's so loud, and Mom listens to her. I didn't know what to do. I watched him, the same man who once filled our apartment with the scent of croissants and sugar, now looking like a stranger who had misplaced his voice." "You had choices," I said quietly. "You just didn't take them." He flinched, then nodded. "What happens now?" I leaned back, letting the clatter of dishes fill the silence between us. "The clock is ticking," I said. "They think they've moved in, but all they've done is start a countdown." I left him there, staring into the steam of his coffee, and stepped into the night air, already thinking of what would come next. The following weekend, word reached me through a neighbor that Lavi had staged a brunch in the apartment. By the time the video clip landed in my inbox, I already knew what I would see: a loud gathering, wine flowing before noon, and her voice carrying above the clatter of dishes. She gestured down the hallway with a flourish, saying, "We'll renovate this stretch. Open it up. Perfect spot for the kids' gallery wall." Later, she announced, "That little office, we're turning it into a yoga room. It's all about vibes." Our parents were there, smiling tightly as if their approval could will her plans into reality. A week later, I learned they had cashed in part of their Cambridge home equity line to help with transition costs. The money vanished into furniture deliveries and contractors who never arrived. Mr. Rallis kept his distance but sent me polite updates. Lavi had tried to approach him with Owen at her side, insisting that since they were the real residents, the lease should be amended. He explained, again, that the lease was non-transferable, that I alone held rights to the unit. "They don't want to hear it," he told me. But the record is clear. Each note from him, signed and dated, went straight into my growing file. Meanwhile, Jonah called, his tone softer than it had been in months. He admitted he was looking for a place of his own, not in the South End, but closer to Harvard Square. He would use the small inheritance his grandmother had left him, enough for a deposit and a few months' rent. "I need to prove I can live without being carried," he said. For once, I heard determination instead of excuses. I kept my responses measured, neither forgiving nor condemning. "If you're serious, start with your own lease." I told him. The days passed, and I watched from a distance as Lavi's certainty grew louder. She posed for more balcony photos. Our parents tagged in every post. To the outside world, it looked like victory. To me, it looked like a family digging steadily deeper, blind to the ground giving way beneath their feet. The 30-day clock moved forward, and with each tick, I knew the fall was coming. On the final morning of the lease period, I woke to an email from Mr. Ruthless confirming that maintenance would post access notices on the unit door. By noon, the messages were up. The apartment would be vacated by the end of the week. I set my phone aside, poured a second cup of coffee, and waited. The call came faster than I expected. Lavi's voice burst through the line, shrill and cracking. "The manager says we're being evicted." "What the hell is going on?" I let her words settle before answering. "The lease is in my name. Lavi. Only mine. The rent is $5,300 a month, and subletting is prohibited. You knew that when you moved yourself in." "You can't do this," she shouted. "We've invested everything Mom and Dad sold their house. Owen quit his job, I cut her off. You didn't ask. You assumed. And assumptions don't hold leases." Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a link. A neighbor had recorded the chaos unfolding in the hallway. The footage showed Lavi pacing in front of Mr. Ruthless, her voice high and furious, accusing him of betrayal. Our mother sat on the steps clutching a potted fern like it was a lifeline, while Frank strode back and forth, his face dark with anger. The camera caught him stopping suddenly, turning on his eldest daughter. His words were clear, even without the audio. "You told us this place was yours." Behind them, Jonah leaned against the wall, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, saying nothing. His silence looked heavier than any argument. I watched the video twice, then closed it. The noise, the anger, the humiliation, none of it touched me anymore. What mattered was that the lie had collapsed in front of the very people she had convinced. The 30 days were up, and the walls she had claimed as her own no longer held her. The fallout had only begun, and I knew the next call would not be about defiance, but about consequence. Within a week of the eviction, Lavi and her family had vanished from the South End tower they had tried to claim. Word filtered back through relatives that they were staying with cousins in Quincy. 4 bodies crammed into a spare room meant for storage. That didn't last long. Soon, they moved into a budget motel near South Station, a place where the walls were thin and the air smelled of bleach and desperation. The gossip traveled even faster than they did. A colleague forwarded me a photo snapped by a commuter Lavi behind the counter of a 24-hour diner, hair tied back, apron stained. Another message showed my father sweeping a tiled floor in the background while my mother wiped down tables. The same people who once lectured me about generosity now wore exhaustion on their faces, paying a price they never thought could reach them. One evening, Eleanor called. Her voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard before. "We should have listened. Tamsin, we believed her because we wanted to believe. I'm sorry for the pressure we put on you. Frank came on the line after gruff and brief. We were wrong. It was the closest I had ever heard him come to admitting fault." Jonah reached out too. We met on a quiet Sunday in Cambridge, this time without excuses. He told me he had signed a lease for a small studio near Harvard Square using his grandmother's inheritance. "I need to learn to stand on my own," he said. "No more hiding behind you, or behind them." He admitted his weakness plainly, then mentioned he had begun therapy to face what silence had cost him. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied his face, the lines deeper, but steadier than before. Maybe accountability had finally broken through where apologies never could. As I walked home that night, the city lights reflected across the river, steady and indifferent. My silence, my patience, my refusal to wrestle in their chaos had done more than any outburst could. Justice had unfolded in its own time, and I hadn't needed to force a single piece of it. What remained was to decide what to build once the rubble had cleared, and how much of the past I was willing to carry forward. Months passed, and the noise of that disastrous season faded into something quieter, almost like background static. My business had a profitable quarter, enough for a substantial bonus. Instead of pouring it into expansion, I signed the deed on a 1-bedroom condo tucked along the brick-lined streets of Beacon Hill. Smaller, yes, but filled with light that spilled across old pine floors and climbed up walls that felt like they had been waiting for me. I moved slowly, choosing each piece of furniture with intention. No rushed deliveries, no compromises to please anyone else. The first thing I hung was not a mirror or a painting from another hand, but a textile I had woven myself linen and indigo threads stretched into a pattern I designed long before the chaos. It anchored the space as mine in a way no contract ever could. Jonah and I began attending separate therapy sessions, then, eventually, overlapping ones. We didn't call it reconciliation, we called it reconstruction, brick by emotional brick. We tested whether trust could be rebuilt without erasing what had been broken. Progress came in small gestures. He signed his own lease, paid his own bills, and showed up on time. For the first time, I saw him take up responsibility not as a burden, but as a choice. One afternoon in early spring, I stepped out of a fabric shop near South Station and saw her. Lavi stood outside a payday lender, clutching paperwork, her expression brittle. Our eyes met briefly. Neither of us spoke. She turned away first, heels scuffed, bag fraying at the seams. I felt no rush of triumph, no anger, only the certainty that the chapter had already closed. That evening, Jonah came over for dinner. He brought loose-leaf tea and set it carefully on the counter. In my new kitchen, he did not touch a drawer or a cupboard until I gestured. He poured water into mugs and sat across from me, patient, present, and unassuming. As I watched the steam rise between us, I understood something clearly. Power was not about holding on or forcing outcomes. It was about walking away at the right time and letting the trap seal around those who had built it for themselves.